Hello, and welcome to Working on a Dime. I don't actually know what episode this is. I think it's going to be episode 19. Today, this counts as work. I'm going to be interviewing the most delightful, delicious, and enduring Vi, who is my editor for my role-playing stuff. My name is Brian. I run Dungeons on a Dime, a publishing imprint for entry-level role-playing content. I'm sure you know who I am. You can also catch the cool, fun, amazing, lovely show sponsored by Roll20, Beast Fables, on this channel every Wednesday at 12:30 British Summer Time, or soon to be Greenwich Mean Time, because daylight savings will soon end. I am joined today by Vi Huntsman. Vi, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I am Vi. I am the person behind Collabs Without Permission, a tabletop gaming YouTube channel where I do reviews and news and discussions. I only do news once a year though, so don't stick around for that. I also am the person behind Collaboration Editing, where I help editors. I help edit books to make them the best they can be. And I've helped Brian out specifically on some of his books, which is awesome.
I just want to interrupt and say shout out, Vi. Your editing skills are superior. I feel like everything that you touch, it's like your Midas. You just go, da, and I'm blinded by the shine of the gold. Like you take this, I feel proud of what I send to you, and then you send it back, and I'm like, oh, that's why I
have to watch out for it. There we go. Okay, there we go. So sorry, did you hear me say all that?
Say what?
Everything I was saying, or did I cut out?
You cut out.
Well, there we go. Yeah, that's what happens when you compliment me. I was saying.
Just the instinct's like, no. Yeah. So, great editor. Anyway, back to you.
And I am here today to be interviewed by Brian as soon as I turn on this light that I turned off a minute ago when we took a lunch break. And Brian, you will explain why we took a little tea break.
We took a tea break because I was being interviewed by Vi. We are doing sort of like a double interview where Vi interviews me and then I interview Vi on Vi's most delicious channel. Vi, what was it called again?
Collabs Without Permission.
On Collabs Without Permission, or in this singular case, Collabs with Permission, because it was Brian, there's an interview with me, the maker of Dungeons on a Dime, about publishing, about working with young entry-level artists, everything I do in that general vibe, over on Collabs Without Permission, which you should go watch, and I'll probably make a clicky-linky thingy somewhere on this video.
Yeah, it's the corner. Or no, wait, that corner.
Well, usually. I'm going to put it somewhere, because I've never done one before, so it'll probably be like over my face or something. It'll be like
they don't let you do that anymore. Yeah.
It'll be somewhere.
Okay.
Or link in the comments. That's what influencers say.
Down in the doobly-doo?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of the doobly-doo. Yes. Anyhow. Oh, also, double shout out. I was saying this today, and I just want to say it again publicly for everyone to hear. I honestly love your TTRPG reviews. They're giving me like early days ContraPoints vibes with like the multiple characters and falling off chairs and the general like chaotic but informative and well structured vibe. It's just loving it.
That is the highest praise I could ask for, because that's honestly part of my inspiration. That's what I'm going for.
So, my purpose for this video is to interview you, Vi, as an editor of tabletop role-playing games. So, is there anything that you want to shout out before we start the interview about what you're doing? Anything cool? If not, that's fine.
Well, just my YouTube channel. Go check it out. There's some old videos. The first two I made actually are by a publisher that is irreputable. And I don't do reviews of their books anymore. But so if that is quickly recommended to you in the sidebar, it's because a lot of people have seen it, not because I endorse them. But there are a lot of other reviews too, and there's also some coming out. I don't know when this is going to be released on your channel, but I'm doing one for 17th Century Minimalists. So if you want to go see a review of a system and 5 little adventures while I'm in a park after I got kicked out of a very expensive restaurant grounds, go check that out.
Oh, and that's what I was going to say. The thing you can plug is the Patreon, where you can support these cool videos, get behind the scenes action, all the fun stuff that I am already subscribed to, and I get to see all the cool stuff. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Early releases and occasional polls and that sort of thing. Good stuff. I'll say hi to you in a message chat.
Of course. So, starting with Vi Huntsman, the editor. How did you first get into editing? Did it start with role-playing games, or was it another field you were working in? Like, describe that entry level into the stuff.
I'm glad you phrased it that way, because I was I was going to go into my first paid editing job. I was going to just like start talk about that, which was a tabletop game. But the way you phrased that reminded me that I when I was in high school, I I was going through a lot. It was high school,
Who wasn't?
you know. Yeah, right. And because of that, I took one. I like retook a class, and they gave me like a official like packet for me to do, and it would count as the class credit. While I was reading this English packet, I was like, there are a lot of errors in here, grammar errors, spelling errors, a little bit of punctuation errors. And so what I did was, on the inside of the front cover, this was just like it was like a cardstock kind of cover. On the inside of the front cover, I wrote page references and edits for all of them. And I was like, so on this page, there's a problem here, and then on here, and then on here, and then it was in English. It was like teaching English, and I edited it and I sent it in, and I was like, and I also completed the packet. But there was that. There was one time where I did it without being asked at a at a different job, at a job that I had, where they were releasing a little brochure for the recreation center. It was, and I went through and I just edited the crap out of it. I was like, hey, there's this and this, and you're calling this a table of contents, but it's in alphabetical order instead of by page number. And I just marked, I just did the red pen on the whole thing. And they were like, Vi, we didn't ask you to do that, and also, and I was like, oh. And so I never learned, though.
I was gonna say, has that worked for you in the past? Because it's worked for you with me. I think that's how you first contacted me. You said, "Oh, I love your work. Here's 2 chapters I've edited because, honey, do you need it?" I think that was pretty much the tone of the email. And I was like, oh wow, I do need it. I've never considered one of these. I thought I was doing okay. Yeah, I think you edited. I think it was Blood in the Water, or The Longest Night.
I think it was Longest Night.
Longest Night. There we go. But yeah, you sent me edited PDF with like, and I was like, this is good.
See, I forgot that I did that with you. I thought that I in my recollection, when I contacted you, it was just, I noticed there were some errors, and I was wondering if on future projects you needed an editor. But I would not be surprised if I was like, hey, here are some edits that I found, because that is actually how I got my first editing job. Yes. So I was thinking about because I have a knack for it. I can't not do it. I did it on this gosh darn stream page right here before we started.
Oh god, yeah.
I was like, Brian, there aren't parentheses around your pronouns. And he was like, oh. And I was like, and then we made a bit about how I can't turn it off. And I was reading Goblinville, actually. I didn't end up editing that, but I emailed them. I was like, hey, I took like tons of notes while reading this. I like wrote down a whole bunch of edits. Would you be interested if I sent you those? And they were like, yeah, sure, send them over. And then yeah.
That's what you did. You were like, I made a bunch of notes, or I made a couple notes. Would you be interested in seeing them? And you sent them over, and it was like, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't know I was this bad.
No,
Yeah,
and see
yeah.
that's
To
my
help your
little
case.
that helps
Mm,
a little bit.
mm,
And I didn't end up sending it over because I had gone through like 80% of the book, like the Goblinville issue, and I hadn't gone through like the last 20%. I didn't want to send it until I like found all of the edits that it needed in the
mm.
last 20%. And so they never got those. But I did do the same thing with Alex from Black Oak Entertainment. Um, and I was like, "Hey, I read Disciples of Bone and Shadow, and I played it, and it was a lot of fun. And I also there were some like little errors that I found. Can I send him over?" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, send him over. That's awesome." I sent him like 100 edits, and he's like, this is like I and this is it was my first interaction with someone doing this, and he said, "This is valuable work. I should be paying you for this." And I was like,
Oh,
"Really?
money.
Oh." And so
Oh.
he says, "Hey, we're doing a reprint. Can I hire you on as an editor for this?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, absolutely." And so I edited that. I edited his next game, Seekers Beyond the Shroud. And then it was a little bit of just from there on out, it was preemptively finding projects before they came out and like asking, like, "Hey, do you need an editor on this project?" One of my biggest success stories with that was with MÖRK BORG or MÖRK BORG.
Ooh. MÖRK
Yeah.
BORG.
Borg.
Yeah.
Where I was just I DM'd Johan, who is a wonderful human being, and I was like, "Hey, do you need an editor?" And he was like, "Yeah, you're in." And I was like, "Oh, cool."
I didn't know you edited MÖRK BORG. I don't have a
I
copy
did.
because I missed the Kickstarter and money.
Mhm.
But beautiful book.
But yeah, it's so pretty.
Just
I love I love how it has influenced design already. Like I know of 2 or 3 projects already that are like, "Oh, we're trying to be like Morkborg a little bit in this way and that way," and I'm like, "That's awesome. That is so cool." But yeah, that was the big one that I was on, and I just put that at the top of every. I'm like every email that I send to people. I'm like, I did Morkborg. You know, Morkborg, the
mm-hmm.
any award winning game. You know.
Yeah. The pretty one that was yellow has a skeleton.
Hmm.
To be fair though, that is such a good feather to have in your cap.
Oh, it really is. It was a big boon, and I feel like I did good work on it. Good work on it. It was good. And I worked on it with and this is the other half of the story. This is the
Mm-hmm.
other 70% of the story. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I
80%
got
with
in
the other
contact.
20% with no edits.
No, it's all edited now.
Ooh.
Um, there's when I was first getting into this, I wasn't sure how anything worked. And so I got in contact with some awesome people. I was joining Discords, and there was someone that invited me to a Discord group. Um, and it was like just a private Discord group of like all of the luminaries in tabletop gaming. It was like being ushered into the Illuminati. It was amazing. In a totally not creepy way, I promise.
I I actually 100% understand this. I got a very quiet DM from someone who I very much admire in terms of like the work they produce. Just being like, oh hey, so there's this Discord group of like people who make role playing games, like designers and illustrators. Like, is there something you're interested in? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And then I get invited in, and I'm like, oh my god, it's them and them and them, and they're really big. They just talk about their cat. So yeah,
That's
it's
exactly what it's like. Yeah.
yeah, it's a very simultaneously humbling but also rewarding, validating feeling.
Hmm. And in that group, I was able to talk with Fiona Geist and Jarrett Crater, who have been editors on some of the biggest, bestest products in
Mm.
tabletop RPGs, and they are both awesome, awesome people, and helpful and friendly and inviting. And they were the ones that I mean, like I still go to them for advice. I am now part of their um, game development coalition,
Mm.
where they do editing, they do layout. We have people on there in the group. So that is this is a secret, so I'm trusting all of you. It's called the Moonrat Conspiracy.
Ooh, I love a conspiracy.
And it's been around for a while. It's been around for like a year and a half, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, so just that's how I got into it. And it's been awesome. It's been so good.
So, having developed these awesome skills, could you just describe your typical editing process? What is like your average? You sit down with a draft that's been sent to you, everything is ironed out and cool. Uh, what does the work look like?
Well, I stare at it from 5 feet away, sitting in a chair. I stare it down, um, so that I so that it knows who's in charge,
Hmm.
for a few hours. Um,
Do you have a little clicker and you call it a clever girl?
exactly. Um, no, I like to. I wonder if I'll ever get to a place where I will read through the document before editing it. But my
Hmm.
process right now, I edit it as I read it. So that's looking for like word usage, for spelling errors, for like how the sentences flow together and how the paragraphs flow together, and all of that stuff. And I feel like when I do that, it gives me this feeling where if I knew the document inside out, and this is where I have to like be humble and say that when I write something, I must hire an editor that's not myself, right? Because I know how everything already flows. When I'm reading someone else's document, that's part of my process is going from the beginning to the end and consuming it as a reader, so that I can like while editing it, so that I can feel out how the ideas flow from one to the other. um so yeah, I give it a good old once over, and then I leave little comments on things that I'm not sure of, which is fun. I think it's an integral part of having like building rapport with people that I'm editing for, because it on the one hand, I'm very upfront with communicating like, hey, all of these edits that I'm making in Google Docs typically, they're suggestions, right? There's a little approve or deny button, which is to say that the author still has control over it. The ball's still in their court. I'm not saying you must do this or that, but um, sorry, um, but there's like I don't know. It makes it feel like you're kind of bouncing the ball back and forth with the author and being like, "Hey, what do you think about this? Oh, what do you think about like what about one of these three words or this and that?" And you just like build up a fun relationship with them, and you're participating in doing the book. So instead of like coming by and dropping something off and then leaving, I kind of like sticking around and working stuff out with the author. I feel like that's part of it's an important part to me. And the other half of that is that after it's laid out, I like doing just like one more read of it. Like before we send it to the printers, I'm here to catch everything I can, Got to do a
Yeah.
proof pass right before it goes to print. And you know what? Sometimes you catch a surprising number of things. Like I was just editing one project I won't say the name of, but I found it was a long manuscript. Don't get me wrong. So it's not like, oh, it was full of things that I missed. Um, but it's a project that Fiona and I were working on together. We were both editing it, and it went through editing, and then it went to layout, and then it got to me for me to do my proof pass, and I found over 400 edits, 400 more little things. Yeah, and so like with those big manuscripts, it's like, man, there's always stuff.
I feel like a font
Which
change can really, in the same way that you were saying, if you read through something, you can't, like if you wrote something, you can't edit it yourself because you don't have that view of it. When you work on a document in one font and then you change it over because it's new to your eyes, everything starts to highlight out.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Something
I
that I think. Oh,
I just wanted to kind of to shoot in on your previous point of like reading through and editing from the beginning. It's not something I'd thought of, but actually that has been super helpful because a lot of the comments on work that we've done together has been stuff like, I've gotten to this point, I don't understand what this means. And that's really helpful because it's ultimately you are the consumer, you are the reader. So if you don't get what it means there or where it's going to go, the reader won't either. So that's actually
mhm.
very really valuable.
Yeah. There was a I was editing something. I was editing so Necronautilus by Adam Vass.
Mm.
I really love that system, first of all, but one of the edits that I made on that was that it was such a simple thing. Basically, in Necronautilus, one piece of it is that you have this spaceship, and it has a certain number of, like, it has a um, like its condition is measured by like a number. And it brought up like a condition clock and the module clocks, but it hadn't mentioned what module clocks were. And so I was like, we need to seed this idea earlier so that people have a frame of reference
Hmm.
for what this is. And it's just those little things that like that make the reading experience smooth, right? And it's that way that I saw some people think that it's futile, but we're trying to find a way to have like a best editing category in the Ennies.
I mean,
This is
that
like
really, that I feel like, I know it's, the Ennies are complicated as a thing because it's about popularity and stuff, but ultimately I feel it could be
right.
really interesting, maybe not necessarily as a category, but maybe like a mentions. Like if you
Mm,
if the winners have to be like, right, these are my editors, and this is something they did that I loved, maybe, or something like that, or like a shout out space, because
right, and because
editors are
it's
so key
it's
to the process.
but they're so invisible to the process as well. You know,
Mm.
it's one of those roles where like if someone puts art in a book, then you see it. If someone puts writing in a book, then you're going to see it. If someone edits a book, then it's like oh, yeah, it's like the editing of a movie. I saw this because I was on that video essay train, you know, when it
Mm.
was like really big, where I was watching a lot about movies, and someone was saying that, you know, editing in movies is good when you just do not notice it. You know, you might, if you're trained, if you have a trained eye, you might notice particular things, but for the average viewer, um, you know, you don't notice those things. And there are times actually that I'm reading something, and because I'm so familiar with the way that like Fiona edits or Jarrett edits, I'll read something and I'll be like, Fiona edited that. Like that's a
Hmm.
sentence that Fiona had her fingers in, for sure. And it's an interesting thing,
This brings me on
but yeah.
to a question. I'm going to jump ahead to this question because it was going to come up later, but it's actually really pertinent right now. How do you strike the right balance between an original author's tone and flowing ideal content as an editor? So, how do you come in and maintain the author's voice, the original content as best you can, while also trimming it, streamlining it, making it flow better, as you said, seeding ideas, making it ultimately so much better than it was?
A lot of that is part of my part of my little brief that I send when I'm asking people if they'd like to hire me as an editor is is like asking or mentioning that I part of my editing style is when I'm reading something, I like to keep an eye out for the words and phrases that sound like the author spent a lot of time picking the right words for it, right? Um, so if an author has like a really strong sentence or has like a really particular vocabulary word to describe something, whether like an adjective that they like that it sounds like they kind of went into the thesaurus for,
Hmm.
then I kind of find myself editing around those, not like not touching them, you know, it's not hands off. It's like, how can I keep this word, like instead of thinking like what would go better here or like what's a better wording, I think how can we move the sentence around so it's like easier to read but still has, you know, this bit that it seems like the author worked hard to get right. So that's kind of how I do that. Part of it is also um, because a lot of my editing makes things you know, more terse. Part of it is trying to find you know, being adaptable to like the tone of different authors or to different sections. Like for example, um, there are to be honest, like examples of play, the sections in a book that are examples of play, like they're written out like GM says this and then Clara says this and then, you know, it's those are pretty easy to edit, I'll say, because they're written in this conversational style. And so instead of cutting down all of the words possible, you know, I'm just like, you know, I do like a more surface level pass where I'm like, how is this idea being communicated in this conversational tone? Or could we like change the scenario so it highlights one more mechanic than is already being showcased instead of you know, like the mechanical text where I'm like, okay, best ideas up front, you know, etc. And so yeah, I think that it's that adaptability that comes into play when keeping the author's voice strong, because I'm not going to edit someone who writes conversationally the end goal of that is going to be just totally different than someone who is, when we're writing mechanical text, about like what rolling a strength check does.
And following on of the point of mechanical text, so often with role playing games, the mechanics have to also both immerse the reader, normally the narrator who's referencing these rules. They have to read it and get a strong sense of the story that will be told with these mechanics. And it also has to be concise enough that you can reference it at the table for accurate, rules use. How do you balance the length and conciseness of text and the flavor that's involved?
I think that it comes down to two things. The first one that I keep an eye out for is the order of information when it's being presented. Um, it's you have to have a keen eye for like what comes for what comes first. For what order the words are in. So like which idea will be first in a strength in like information about, as I said, like making a cunning check or making a strength check. Or rolling a saving throw. You want to put information right up front that is going to be most important or that will communicate the idea the fastest. And the other part of that is making sure that everything is written the same from piece to piece. So when we're talking about mechanical text, if I say, if the sentence was like, strength indicates how strong you are when you move things and when you're running really fast, or when you're like kicking things. You want to when you make a strength check, you roll a d20. That means that if you succeed, then you succeed what you're doing. But then when you're talking about dexterity, if you're like roll a dex check under these circumstances, it's like if it starts that way, you're like no, we gotta
You've
switch it
established
around.
a format, you need to follow the format.
And that's part of the thing is that like that really helps when referencing things at the table if information is presented in the same order, so that if you know how to reference one piece of information, then you'll know how to reference every other parallel piece of information. So that's something you keep an eye out for, so that when people are reading it, they're not like searching for it, whether it's on the page, in the paragraph, or in the sentence itself. Just like like on every level.
So, I do love follow-on questions because we're talking about clarity, and before you said that you like to have one last final read-through when everything's laid out.
Mm-hmm.
I know that from a design and writer perspective, because I both write the text and also then lay it out, I find it very important that I find that I spend almost as much time laying out as I do writing the text, because I want to make sure that the breaks on the page, where the illustrations sit, specific points, formatting, it all sits in a way that is easy to read on the page and you can find the information, but also that there are natural, like the way you turn the page affects the importance of the text that you see, the right headings in the right places, the kind of heading it has, the hierarchy you give the information. How involved would you ideally want to be in the laying out process? Do you think editors should be more involved or less involved? How much are you involved right now? Kind of like a general like layout, editor, mesh, how do kind of question.
I think that I'm not actually very involved in the layout itself, or how information is delivered, because in my experience, I've worked with some really talented layout artists, layout design people, and they it's just like someone trusts me to do my job as an editor. There's a lot of trust that they'll do their job as in layout correctly, but it is kind of um, it feels kind of special to be able to um, give little inputs on that, like, oh, I think there's like this header is different than this one, or that thing. So more of like the touching up of the little edits, where I'm of layout, where I'm like, how could we, like, what are the little things here, instead of information design.
Yeah.
But I love hearing about that, though, because that's fascinating as like a part of the process that I don't see, because there are lots of steps of it that I don't see, and so I love hearing about that.
I definitely think there is a lot of crossover at points with those skills. We mentioned the role playing game MÖRK BORG earlier. MÖRK BORG. Man flesh. Yes. We mentioned MÖRK BORG. It is a very graphic game. It's, in theory, to some degree, rules light. It's not a lot of actual text, word, verbiage content. But the layout and the way the information is presented on the page is as important as the actual literal text itself. Sometimes more
Definitely.
important. I mean, the page about hit points has like 10 words on it. It's an entire full page spread, but there's like, and each word is a different font. But it's just the way it lays, the way you see it, it's very interesting. So, and I could see that if it had been done differently, it would go from being like a very charismatic, very poignant page to being an incomprehensible mess. So I feel like there is a lot of that crossover. I think it'd be very interesting to see
Right.
how you would lay out a game
Hmm.
from an
I
editor's
probably,
perspective.
yeah, I probably have InDesign, right? Is that the one that you
Well,
do
you
layout
can
in?
use InDesign. That's Adobe InDesign, which you have to pay Creative Cloud for, which is expensive. I have it because I use the whole Adobe suite because I single man business, but uh, I wouldn't recommend it. I'd say there's Affinity. Uh, well, Affinity is the suite. Affinity is the Adobe, so to speak, the company that publishes it. But Affinity has a bunch of like single pay programs that do everything the Adobe programs do. So they've got Affinity, which does laying out, which would be InDesign. They've got like a Photoshop version.
Hmm.
Long rant.
Do they
Point is,
have?
don't have to use
Yeah,
InDesign, but
gotcha,
they have
gotcha.
a laying out one.
I'll have to try that one day when I'm doing my own thing.
Mm,
I did run a Kickstarter for something a long time ago, and it didn't fund. It was my first. It was before I had edited anything. Even I was like, hey, I
mm.
kind of want to write a thing about like a city full of thieves, a thief city,
Hmm.
where everyone is a thief, and there's
It's
like 8 thieves guilds,
it's called
and it
Affinity
was.
Publisher, which I mean does what it says on the tin, but it does
Mm-hmm.
the InDesign idea of like taking. It's not a word editor, word processor like Google Docs. It is you lay out text, you lay out images, you move things, and then it exports it high quality
Mm-hmm.
for you.
Gotcha, gotcha. What was I? There was a point that I was going to say about layout, though. Or was it about Morkborg? Morkborg. I forget what it
Um,
was.
we were talking about the crossover of editing and layout. We talked about working in InDesign. Worked about maybe you, an
Mm,
editor, laying something out.
yeah, yeah, but maybe one day when I get a project of my own,
Hmm.
if I have money for it. Because on the other hand, I know a lot of cool layout people now. You know.
Mm-mm. Well, I was going to say, oh, you could lay it out and then I could be your editor, but then I thought, nope, that would not go well. You would have very, very bad text.
False.
You would have too many N dashes.
Taking after
Mm.
me. I see.
Mm-mm. Well, the thing is, use M dashes. I use N dashes, the incorrect one,
Oh.
too short. Which I realized is now why the text to speech reader in my tag text just splurs all of the words together really quickly because it's an N dash, not an M dash. So as opposed to treating it as a pause, as like a semicolon, instead just breathlessly just
They will do that.
yeah.
I did notice that in Blood in the Water. I was reading it for the other half of the interview, and I was like, "There's a little n dash then space," and then in some of
Mm,
these, and I'm like, "Hmm,
mm. It's before I had such great talent working for me. Anyway, a next question. What do you find most enjoyable in the process of editing, and what do you dislike the most? What's the most
hmm."
tedious?
I don't think I have ever been brought to tears of joy by an
Hmm.
edit, but I've gotten close. There's some times where something really comes together, whether it's on the in layout or on the manuscript, and where it just like strikes me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is how it goes. This is the way it's supposed to be communicated. Or like or there's just like this profound moment of like of realization where I'm like, oh, if we move this idea like right here, like this is good. Or like, I don't know, those moments are my favorite things. I think, actually my least favorite thing is actually prose. Prose can be so hard to edit. It's oh my goodness, because like I think on the one hand, I saw an interesting conversation the other day, which I will briefly touch on and not take a side on. But someone was saying that RPG writers are different than like fiction writers because they're not writing fiction. You know, in the same way that like bullet points are a big design feature of this kind of wave of RPG design. And someone was saying like those are not, you know, they're not a hallmark of like fiction writing or of like it's creative writing, but they were trying to figure out like where it sits on that continuum. And so one could argue that under that framework, prose written by an RPG writer is going to be a little bit I want to say amateurish, but it's not all that. It's just like, you know, it's not maybe what they're most experienced in.
It's going to be
And
a
this is
different
not
skill.
Yeah, and this is not calling out anyone in particular, but it is a different skill. And so I think while editing that, I'm an RPG editor. So like the other half of that is that it's not what I'm trained to edit, it's not what I'm accustomed to editing, but also that it's like, ooh, it's really dense. You know, I'm like, okay, I have to like break it down in a way that I don't have to for game text, whether it's mechanical text or whether it's like narrative text. I have to think like, what are the ideas being communicated here? You know, where are these ideas repeated, instead of thinking for like sentences where I can just read them and I'd be like, these two kind of sound like they're saying the same thing. With prose, it's like, okay, is this the same idea? And if so, can we combine it? And it's like a whole extra 2 or 3 steps. So that's actually probably my least favorite.
Okay,
Yeah.
very succinct. Uh,
Mm.
what do you often have to compromise on? What are some things?
Mm.
I'm not asking for like specific examples. Not going to drag anyone. But what are some things you've had to compromise on in the past where you think it has to be one way, or there's a difficult. Again, we were talking about that balance of like, oh, how much flavor and how much mechanic, something like that. Like, where is there a difficult compromise that is never going to be a battle you can win in editing?
Yeah. There I have one example that I can give you in good humor, which
Oh, how
is
dare
one
you!
from no, not of you. It's actually of
Oh,
MÖRK
okay.
Borg.
Oh, okay, cool, cool. I was like,
Yeah,
oh no, she's gonna drag me on my own channel, which is totally okay. But yeah. Anyway, yes.
no.
Borg, Borg.
It is, yeah. Um, so there's a comma. There's a comma in MÖRK Borg, and I would run and get my book. I know where it is, but it's a. I don't want to just like cut the stream off for like 30 seconds. I run and get a book, but there's a comma. It's between a font change where there's one type of font for like a block of text, and then the next text like starts next to it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the the next section of text begins with a comma, and I was like, Johann, please remove that comma. And he was like, no. I was like, so it's deliberate. It's there. It's like a design choice. But I was like, please remove that comma.
I feel like that's kind of Morkborg's vibe, though. It's like, oh, dark demon, cruel adventure. We even put a comma in where it really kind of maybe shouldn't be. Editors everywhere are like, tearing out eyes, screaming for dead gods. Love it.
Oh my goodness, he's a very reasonable person,
Mm,
except for that comma.
mm.
Except for that comma. It was a call out
Sometimes
to
you just
Johann.
you gotta pick your hill. You gotta. It's
Yeah.
your design choice. It's your magnum opus. It's your comma opus.
I think that man, with things that I have to compromise on. I don't think that there's I think that a lot of compromise actually comes in a healthy dose of both ways, but a lot of it comes from, and this is kind of my perspective as someone that like I said, spent a lot of time editing things when people didn't ask me to. Where I kind of have this impulse where I'm like, I feel like I'm being annoying by editing sometimes. And so I think a positive perspective on that mindset is that the author actually is able to humbly compromise with with their own work, with what the editor is suggesting. um And that's I think that's where the compromise comes in. I think a lot of the time when the author doesn't want something to be a certain way, um, then it's less of me compromising with them than it is me coming to a greater understanding of what they're going for, and then helping that be the best it can be. Because if I'm making an edit for like terse clarity, and they say, maybe I don't want it to be like super terse. I like want to let this idea sit in people's brains for a few extra words. Then that's the new idea, that's the new framework that I take to that edit, where I'm like, oh, okay. Then under that framework, how are we going to um, edit the sentence differently? Yeah.
That's really empathetic of you. Like, yeah, it's good. I like the understanding that goes into that side of things as well. I feel I've not worked with a lot of writers in terms of co-writing something before, and so it's interesting to because to some degree when you're an editor, at least the amount that we've worked together, sometimes it feels like you are a co-writer. Like you understand and believe in the project as much as I do, and it's nice to see waves of understanding come through and then new like supports come out of the editing process, as you said, getting the fingerprints in the sentence where it makes it better but also reinforces the original message.
And I think that the empathy you're talking about is definitely there, where you have to recognize as an editor that there's a lot of trust in that direction, toward you as an editor, a lot of trust coming your way when someone is like, um, handing off their manuscript to you and being like, okay, this is a thing that kind of represents a lot. Like, I spent a lot of time on this, and that is really, it's really, I don't know. I think that's a responsibility,
Mm.
that you hold as an editor.
So my next question for you is, we know that the most fun project you've ever worked on is In the Red. So, and
Oh,
you
it
can't
is.
lie. Like,
Yeah.
it's of course it's In the Red, and actually that's probably the best project you're ever going to work on. And I
It's
mean,
all
this is your
downhill.
retirement video. But if you were to work on a future project, either real or imagined, what would your ideal project be?
Oh man. Um,
And if you want to sit on that for a bit and come back to it, because it is a big question, we can talk about other
that's
stuff.
a big question. Let's see. What if I had an ideal, like, a dream project? Hmm.
I don't necessarily mean in terms of like, this specific writer and like, this. Like, I'd
Right.
like to
Right.
do MÖRK BORG too. I mean more like, what kind of project would you want to work on? What kind of size? What vibe? Yeah.
I think that something that I'm excited to do this coming February, which will already clue a couple people in, is Zine Quest 3. Um,
Oh my god,
yeah,
people
Moon.
prepping for that already? Oh god.
Oh yeah, people were prepping for it already, definitely. And part of that is Moonrat Conspiracy is wanting to do a second round of like so something that we talked about in the interview that we did in the past hour was how part of your project is supporting new artists who are coming out of the scene that need like a that could use a professional resume booster, right?
Mm-hmm.
To like and like get experience working and like see what it's like. And part of what the Moonrat Conspiracy wants to do is like show people, hey, if this is your first project, then we're gonna do that, where we're gonna give you a kind of like a monetary discount, right? Where we can say, hey, we want to support you in getting some stuff out. We want you to see what it's like to work with editors. We want to make your product the best it can be. And I'm excited to see that, because while it is fun to work on the really big projects, and I do have a second answer, which is a project like that. I think that working with people who are new to having an editor, like working with Alex or working with you, and probably some other people that it was kind of like their first time having an editor. It's really rewarding to make that a positive experience.
Mm.
And so when we're able to do that for like Zine Quest people that are like figuring out what it's like to be in this hobby space,
Yeah.
um, or this industry, making that a positive experience is really fun. And want to keep doing that. And so I think I will be joining the Moonrats in picking up some of the editing load for Zine Quest 3, which is going to
That
be fun.
is a fantastic, very laudable thing to be doing. And yeah, it's satisfying to do things that help people. Uh, it's just nice. It's a nice, gooey, warm feeling. And I would like to clarify before when I said people are prepping for Zine Quest, that's just me being like, oh god, I need to have something ready. Oh god. Ugh. I do have a plan. I will. Actually, I'll talk to you later.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, okay.
yes. Anyway, so you had a second answer for your ideal project.
I think. Oh, so there was a Twitter joke that someone tweeted the other day. I think it was tongue in cheek. But they
Oh,
said,
is this what we talked about
um,
the other day?
I I don't think so.
Oh,
It
this is
was
a
one
different
that
joke.
said, yes. The joke was they were saying, um, they said, "Oh gosh, I really wish that someone actually made like a tabletop RPG that's like grim, dark, and your characters die really easily. They just one. It doesn't exist." It was very tongue in cheek. Um,
Yeah.
and having edited MÖRK BORG, which is kind of like
Borg.
it's like MÖRK BORG. It's like right up there with those kinds of games, and also it's like I don't know, it's like a pinnacle of graphic design in tabletop RPGs. I'm excited to I want to work on some lighthearted projects. So working on In the Red, working on the Dungeons on the Dime adventures, that are, it's not, that are still able to, because there's nothing that's inherently more or less complex or, respectable about being like grim, dark, gritty, realistic, and deadly than there is something that is lighthearted in tone, or that has, that is colorful, right? And so I think that my dream project, I think, like right now, just for this moment, is to work on something that has that like really big positive tone and has like Break. Break is an RPG that's coming out, to be determined, coming out soon. And I emailed the authors. I was like, hey, like it's like Ghibli inspired. It's bright and colorful. The art is beautiful. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of a dream project for the moment, because I want to participate in and like lift up the kind of, a variety of tone for games. um and that's where I'm at right now. Yeah.
Cool. The joke that I thought of from the other day was a system that is never written down that has to be orally spoken to one another. And I thought
Yes.
that you were going to say something like, oh, so when people are playing, I just correct them mid sentence. Oh, you used that
I edit
preposition
it as they're
wrong?
saying it.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
yeah. That pause was too long. I think you should just ended the sentence there. But yeah, like a range of different themes and essentially helping uplift the different stories we can tell through role playing games. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yes.
So that rounds up a lot of my questions about editing. And if you didn't mind, I had a few questions about some of the cool videos you make on collabs
Mm,
without permission. Da da da
yes,
da.
please. I am ready. I enjoy talking
Limbered.
about my YouTube stuff.
So, uh, it's a similar question to the beginning of the editing. How did you bring? Because first of all, let's describe what content you make. If I
Oh yeah.
uh, would summarize, I would say it is video essay style tabletop role playing game reviews. They have a somewhat humorous element to them, but ultimately, at the heart of it, it's still a review. It's still honest experience, and it's not, I would say, in the sense of paid for or like publicity. It is a true review in that, oh, I've played this, or I've read it through, and I thought this. It's not sponsored. Because you
Mm.
do like see some like featured plays where like a bunch of like famous people like do a thing and then it's like, oh my god, but it doesn't actually tell you if the game is good or not. It's just people going like, ah. So you do a true
Mhm.
review, video essay format, and they tend to be, well, they can be anywhere from like 10 minutes to an hour, so some really invested effort. How did you bring this very, what in my experience of video editing, like time-consuming and very like energy-consuming process into your wheelhouse as an editor?
Um, I uh, I think that there's kind of like this stereotypical like, oh, it was kind of influenced by the YouTube that I was watching, and a lot of that was video essays, which is also influenced by the kind of video that YouTube started promoting, which was longer form content. Um, but it was also because I was looking at the um, the tabletop RPG reviewers that are in this space. And I think that I was unsatisfied with the range that we had, because I think there were people that were talking about them in front of bookshelves, and there were people that were flipping through them with their hands on screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I think that Questing Beast definitely has his niche. Questing Beast is good at what he does. He brings in a lot of views. He can move products, right? He can move sales. And he has opinions about the same things. He'll be able to talk about quality of the book and the page construction, and certain things about the layout. And that's kind of what you go to him for. And I was like, I feel like there are things that can be parsed from RPGs that we're not getting from any of the reviewers right now. And I was like, that means I should probably do something, doesn't it? Because my roommate Anna at the moment was starting a YouTube thing where she was talking about art and reviewing art supplies in kind of this comedic way, and talking about autism as well. And like trying to figure out, like, she's doing like three things at once, and she ended up now she's doing a podcast, which is super awesome. Go listen to Find Us Alive.
Ooh.
Anyway, it's really good. SCP. Um, and so she had the face light and the microphone and a camera that she let me borrow. And I was like, i'm gonna make a review. And so my first video, and this what's funny about it, is my first video was a Questing Beast parody, where I reviewed a book by LOTFP. And you should, yeah, don't look those up, don't look them up, look up
Yeah.
someone else.
Mm-mm.
um and it was I was like, people say like, oh, your first video is going to be pretty shitty, and you're like, your first anything is going to be kind of like not the best it's going to be, and you're going to go up from there. And so I was like, okay. And in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way, I made a Questing Beast video. And it was it is like that. I know, I'm like, that's like the third level of the joke, so don't go shouting that everywhere. Um,
I thought you were going to say, everyone says it gets out from there, but actually that was the best video I ever made. It's just been downhill from there. No, but yeah, so. Yeah.
and no, after that, I made a 30-minute review of a single adventure where I shot at like 4 or 5 locations and did a whole segment as Brian David Gilbert, and one that had like so many graphics. Oh, it was a nightmare to produce. Actually, yeah, if we had it set up, I would screen share and show you my old files, because I saved all of that. I still have like every frame from the explanation point section, where I have like where you have like a black screen, and then you layer on like one graphic and then another graphic and then multiple graphics, then you modify the ones in the background. And oh, it was so complex, and it
Mm-hmm.
was it was really good. And I'm really proud of that video. And so and that was kind of what I was aiming to make. Was I was like, you know what, this is about the themes, it's about how it plays, it's thematic, it's entertaining, it's comedic. And I don't think I peaked with my second video, but I think that that's the ideal of what I was going for, um, with my with like what the kind of video that I was choosing to make, this kind of video essay style, like you said.
Yeah. So a follow on from this, the tone of your videos is comedic, but also there are some very like, while critical and about helping and growing a thing, there is a lot of very blunt criticism in your videos.
Mm.
Like you could have outright said like, I don't like this, and you've like pointed at the page, you're like, this is bad. What drew you to this side or this style of criticism, which has its pros and cons.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, like, I, there's a couple things that I kind of juggle when doing that, which is that on the one hand, I know that the best reviewers, like I said with Questing Beast, like if I want to know something about how the book is, if it's offset versus print on demand or how the layout looks, I'll go to him. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to kind of curate um my tastes in an obvious way rather than stating them objectively. I think that saying like I like this or I don't like this in amidst other criticism allows people to kind of get a feel for the kind of thing that I do like or that I don't like. But I think that would be, if that were the only perspective that I was able to take on, then I think that my reviews would be less useful. And so I think the other side of that is that when I'm reading a book, I want to, I meet it where it's at, right? And so in the video that is that's going to be up on my Patreon soon for reviewing 17th Century Minimalist, it might be a game that is a little bit dark comedy and a little bit or a lot like your characters die easily, like that cliche I was talking about earlier. How there are a lot of games that do that. I think that I met the game there where it was at, and I analyzed its systems under that framework, and was able to heap glowing praise on the ways that they achieved that feeling. And so while there are moments where I'll say, I didn't like this, or I really like this, I think that there's also, I feel like a responsibility to not review something like it's something it's not, right? And so I can't review every adventure or every system as if it was written for me, because not every one of them is. Um, I was reading some reviews for some of the adventure packs for 17th Century Minimalist before I filmed it, because I was like, on the one hand, I want to hear what other people have to say, and also I want to say things different than them. I want to add to the conversation, and it made me take on a new perspective to some of the adventures, because in two of them there are, and this is in Questing Beast's review. He said that in two of the adventures you are offered a reward, but upon completing it, there is no reward. Right? In the one, there's like a nobleman who offers you gold for doing something, but if you survive, then he like has you chased out of town instead of paying
Mm-hmm.
you. And in another, there's a guy who convinces you to bring something from one place to another, and at the end, it turns
It goes
out that,
badly.
yeah, it goes badly and you don't get paid. And so instead of talking about how that's odd and doesn't work as an adventure design, I talked about how it played into what the system was trying to do and the stories it was trying to tell, because obviously it was the kind of story that it was trying to tell, because it was like right there in front of me,
Mm.
right? And so I figured out what play the game was trying to encourage, rather than just criticizing how it wouldn't work um, if I was running it as something that was made for me,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's an important part of like having a healthy criticism of something.
Fantastic. That's a very succinct answer. I would have my final question for this interview is what do you enjoy about reviewing and making these video essays in comparison to editing?
Oh, um,
And as a little tag on the end, what would
yeah,
your perfect work life balance be? Like 50-50, 60-40? What would you want to do more of, less of? What's like a treat, like that sort of energy?
yeah. I think that, well, yeah, I'll answer that first part first, which is that um, there is definitely a different kind of joy that comes from editing than comes from making YouTube videos about books. Um, and I think that, I have to think about this for a second, because I really enjoy like digging into an adventure and talking about the themes of something, whereas with editing I'm making the product the strongest it can be. I think with reviewing stuff, there's an element of demystifying the adventure itself, of like opening it up and admiring what you find inside.
Hmm.
um And I think that, part of my name on YouTube, Collabs Without Permission, is partially because I wanted to imitate the styles of other creators like Questing Beast, because while there was I did mention how it was kind of a joke. It is also an admiration of him, and trying out his style and seeing
Mm.
what I could learn from it. And I also did, one I made a huge green screen video imitating the YouTuber Nakey Jakey. And I mentioned a couple others that I've done. While
That
that's
is
part of it.
really interesting because I thought it was in reference to the reviews element because the reviewers obviously aren't part of that video. You just have their book,
Right.
and yeah. So
and
that's
that's and
really
that's part of
interesting.
it. That is part of it, though, where I was saying the other reading of that is that I'm able to, like, collaborate with them and with my audience, and I feel like I'm actually sharing something with them, whereas I'm, especially because of YouTube, where you're able to watch someone and see their face, and and kind of connect with them, because of that. There's an element of where when I'm talking about an adventure or talking about a system, there is an element of, like, I'm sharing my genuine experience with you. And what that means for, uh, just like the joy of sharing an idea, or like sharing enjoyment of something. um and I love doing that. It's a lot of fun. So whereas with editing, I'm collaborating with an individual person, I feel like with YouTube I have, like, an audience of people, or I have like a a group of people who are interested in things I have to say, and I'm able to kind of be excited at them about something. So
Mm.
rather than being excited about improving something, I'm like, hey, isn't this thing so cool, right? Isn't this
Yeah.
adventure or this book, like, look at this, like, here are some things that I like about it. And
Hmm.
it feels fun having, people be excited to see my videos, um especially because I've got a couple writers on my Patreon. um I've got Nate Tremay, I've got, Adam Vass, right? Like, all these people that I'm like, ooh, I really like your stuff, y'all. And just, like, seeing the response to filling that niche, like I talked about at the beginning, where I
Mm.
started being a YouTuber because I saw that there was a need for this kind of content, reviewing tabletop stuff, and in a kind of way I could um there's this complex thing that I talk about, where, not talk about, but, like, I've mentioned to, like, with my friend group, which is that, wow, like, if you talk publicly about something, then you're making yourself an authority on it. And I think that's interesting to, like, talk about. But I think there's also an element of, like, I think it's fun to be a curator of content and talk about the things that I enjoy, and kind of, like, for someone to, like, see a video made about something that they wrote, I think that's validating to them as well. And I think that just being part of that process with creators and consumers and viewers, is, super rewarding.
That's a very prescient thought that has put words to something I didn't quite realize I was grappling with. I'm writing an adventure right now that, in theory, is meant to feature an autistic character, and I've been really struggling, as opposed to other things that I've written, because by writing about my disability, by writing about personal experience, I'm now an authority on it. I'm now telling people this is how
Hmm.
you should roleplay autistic people, and it suddenly becomes this very important thing. Whereas when you're curating content, you're uplifting and you're upholding, and you're like, "This is really cool," but it's not quite the same. You're celebrating rather than uh, telling, which can feel a little bit like dictating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's, part of that creative web.
ah, this has been a very fascinating chat. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I've really enjoyed this. This has been awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, so I think to wrap things up, we should just re-summarize who we are. So, if Vi, you would like to start.
I am Vi Huntsman. I edit books. I write some stuff as well. I make YouTube videos at Collapse Without Permission. I'm on Twitter at I'm a Waffle Bunny. I tweet more about, role playing games than I used to. It used to be just retweets. I'm also on Discord if you want to come say hi. Check me out on my YouTube channel. I respond to comments all the time. So if you say, "Hey, I thought this moment was funny," I'll be like, "Ah."
Yeah.
If you want to come check out my Patreon, it's linked in the description of all my videos. Collabs Without Permission. That's where I'm at, and I'm joined by the wonderful Brian.
Thank you very much. Yeah. The way my thing mirror, I'm always pointing in the wrong direction. Yeah. Anyway, I'm Brian. I run the publishing imprint Dungeons on a Dime. You probably know who I am, and if you don't, then I am an incredibly magnanimous divine being, and you are lucky to have been graced by my presence today. You can find me at Dungeons on a Dime, or you can go to my website, doad.co.uk, where you can find such free role playing adventures as Adventures on a Dime, my cool, awesome book in the red, and all sorts of fun stuff that I have published and that Vi has edited. This has been incredibly fun. Thank you very much. And I'm going to stop recording now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.